This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. We find ourselves in this particular week with a very difficult problem on our hands, and that is the impending shutdown of the federal government caused by the crisis over passing a budget in Washington, D.C. Let me try to put it in perspective for you, because a lot of you have been sending me email or calling me and wanting sort of to vent about it. The U.S. budget is not just a financial spreadsheet that defines what is going to be spent and where it's going to be spent. In some ways, you need to think of the federal budget as the most political document in government. The budget is a reflection of the values of Congress and of the executive branch in terms of where their priorities lie and what they would like to expand and fund and what they would like to shrink or discard. And so if you don't have a coherent group of individuals in either the House, the Senate, or in concert with the White House, you begin to get what I call the clash of values. And those values don't have to be just things such as gay marriage or abortion or moral issues. By values, I mean a lot more. I mean, should we be emphasizing alternative energy, or should we be supporting traditional energy, coal, gas, oil? Should we be making our military more robust, investing in new weapon systems, engaging in military operations around the world in order to achieve the political objectives and values of the United States? And if so, how much should we invest there? Should we be directing our national funds to rebuilding the infrastructure, improving the educational system, or should we be reducing all of those things and letting the private sector, state government, and other entities basically pick up the ball for all of those types of activities? And so you can see that, when you have conflicting groups, the Senate is controlled by the Democrats. The White House is controlled by a Democratic president. The House of Representatives is nominally or supposedly controlled by the Republicans, and they have a pretty big majority in the House. But in fact, within that majority in the House of Representatives, there is now a diverse group of Republicans who essentially disagree and have some pretty significant policy differences among each other. And so in the House of Representatives in particular, the battle is going on between the much more fiscally conservative Tea Party movement, the traditional Republican establishment of the House, as well as socially conservative members of the House who feel that their agenda opposed to abortion and so on ought to be infused into public policy and into the budget process. That means that in order to reach an agreement on budgets, you have to reconcile those and other differences that I haven't even mentioned, which is that there are conflicts between representatives and senators from urban states, from agricultural states, from southern states and northeastern states, and so there are these regional differences that also define what the budgetary priorities are of different members of the House and Senate. Additionally, we're faced with a discussion that is very important, and that is whether budget resolutions, budget bills, should have legislation attached to it that deals with non-budgetary considerations, non-budgetary issues. And in the particular case, this week, actually, one of the problems is that conservative Republicans have attached some riders to the budget that would cut funding and defund and basically remove federal government support for organizations such as Planned Parenthood because conservative Republicans are opposed to abortion, and Planned Parenthood, among other things, provides healthcare services to women and information and so on, but also is probably one of the most effective abortion providers and reference places in the United States. And so what you have is a clash on the one hand over the size of the federal budget, how much the federal budget should exceed in federal revenue, how many cuts, what size should the cuts be in the federal budget in order to shrink it down and begin to move towards maybe not a balanced budget, but a much less unbalanced budget. And then on top of that, whether social riders and other types of amendments should be added to budget bills that the president, for example, and the Democrats in particular don't agree with and will not approve. So when people become frustrated with the fact that we have not been able to put together a budget, I want to remind you and them that we have never successfully put together a budget on time because there are always struggles going on. It's very rare that those struggles reach the crisis point and the kind of apex or zenith where the funding runs out and there is no budget and the federal government actually has to begin shutting down. And that's where we find ourselves today. Let me answer another question that one of you asked me, and that is the question of whether it's catastrophic, whether it's terrible, or whether it might be a good thing and a healthy tonic to have the federal government actually shut down, begin shutting down. Well, my own view is that we're not shutting down what you would call emergency services. So anything that would be harmful to public safety and public health will continue to get funded. The programs that are shutting down, in fact, they're starting to shut down as I speak to you. We don't know for how long, but are all of the others that in some cases are not necessarily urgent in the short run. So those programs will shut down and people will be furloughed. That's a shame, because people won't be paid. But then on the other hand, many of us have been furloughed and have had to take days without pay in order to help out our organizations, with budgetary problems. That's true, for example, of Iowa State University and other state universities, and it's been true of state government here in Iowa and other parts of the country. And it's a shame, but it's in the end you buy a few less lunches and cups of coffee, and you don't go to get the Sunday New York Times, and that ends up, if you do enough of those things, it ends up balancing out. So I think that the confrontation between the president, the Congress, and the American people on the budget in April of 2011 is actually a healthy tonic and a good exercise that will sober up the process, that will maybe have the Tea Party movement members of Congress understand a little bit better what governing is, what the government is all about, the fact that it is generally about compromise, and when you take positions that are uncompromising, then you are essentially misusing the structure of government that has been handed down to us, because the structure of government that the founders put together is one that requires cooperation among the House and the Senate and the President. And therefore, since sometimes those institutions have different objectives, missions, values, and sometimes they're controlled by different political groups or parties, in the end, demand that you sit down and negotiate something that everybody can live with. If you take a position that we're not going to compromise on what we know is the right thing, in the end, then it produces gridlock. And that's what we have right now. So I think this process could help to instruct people, especially the new members of Congress who went in with a lot of passion and fire and determination, much like the folks that got elected in 1994 that were part of Newt Gingrich's Contract with America, where you had very determined, focused, and sharply divided government with individuals taking very strong positions. And you'll remember that the federal government shut down in that case as well. I cannot answer the question that you want answered, which is who is going to be hurt more by this? Is it going to be President Obama for not giving in to the House Republicans? Is it going to be the House Republicans for essentially taking positions on issues, wanting to cut too much and adding social riders and other amendments to the budget bill that are not directly related to the budget? We will have to see, and I have a feeling that the voters will exercise their good judgment in the 2012 election in terms of who's to blame, so to speak. This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com, trying to solve the budget puzzle for you. Thanks.